Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy beautiful Thursday. We are so thrilled to meet someone who is brand new to both our lives, minutes old in Maz's life, days old in mine. But you will learn that I have spent a lot of time. I've spent more time with her than she has spent with me. And so I feel like I know her really, really well. And we are delighted to have Dr. Amy Hoyt joining us this morning. So let's just bring her on and get right to the conversation. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
We're great. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. This is really, I'm going to go right to thrilling. I'm thrilled.
Thank you.
Likely, so this is a huge thing.
It's true.
If Dana's thrilled, she is.
Yeah, I don't waste adjectives on things that aren't merited.
You know, I get that from you. I like it. That's one of the things I really like about you.
Wow.
Straight to the
Thank
point.
you. Thank you.
I love
that. We'll stick with that for now.
Love it.
So, Amy, you are on to talk about two specific things, and I'm betting, without knowing, that they're actually pretty related. So let's start where we always start with, take us from there to here, and your there can start wherever you want to start, and bring us up to sort of your most present here, and then we'll talk about the whole health lab.
Okay. So my there started when I was pretty young. I was a senior in high school, and I was drinking every day and without letting anyone know, and showing up for school, and that, very untypical in terms of the high school experience, where I was keeping my drinking secret because I knew it was excessive even for someone in high school. And my best friend called my parents and let them know. And I was so upset, of course. I felt very betrayed. And now I just think that was one of the most beautiful gifts that anyone's ever given me.
So brave.
Are you still friends with this person?
We are. We absolutely are. Yes. Yes. Yeah, I'm friends with most of the people I grew up with, actually, which
that's nice.
It is, because they saw me at my worst. That was one of the worst parts of my life, and I feel like we've grown through that. And so, yes, I have a deep appreciation for the people who stuck with me through the dark days.
Well, that's when you know they're real friends. As my mother loves to say, everybody can do Christmas. Yes. Everybody shows up for the fun stuff. It's the hard stuff that is where the rubber meets the road.
Absolutely. Yes. So you'll love this part. My parents looked around and they tried to figure out what to do with me. And they actually sent me to Minnesota, to Hazleton. To their youth program. And so I spent 30 days in Hazleton, and I was sure when I got there that they would tell me it was a mistake and my parents had overreacted. But no, they kept me. And then they sent me to a halfway house for 6 months.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So then I was in Wayzata at a halfway house called Way 12.
Okay.
And finished high school. I didn't actually quite finish. I tried to finish in Minnesota, but I did end up finishing back in California. So that was a very pivotal experience. I mean, quite life-changing to spend that much time in such a concentrated treatment, really.
I bet it was. And then also just to be totally out of your normal geography as well. I mean, Minnesota is lovely, but it's not California.
No, and it's not family, right? Yes. So, but I think that's why I have such an affinity for the Midwest and for Minnesota specifically, because it's where my life really started. And so I ended up going through a lot of different realizations and recovering some memories of early abuse from a foster boy who had lived with us. And it all started to kind of make sense as to why I had basically was self-medicating.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I decided to figure myself out. And I finally graduated from high school and I went to college and I discovered women's studies. And I loved women's studies and gender studies. And I loved the language of systems and dynamics of power. And that really spoke to me. And especially as someone who was newly kind of forming an identity that was based on bodily autonomy, it
Mm.
really, really spoke to me.
Mhm.
So let's see, do you want me to pause a little bit and then
No,
We're happy to jump in when the
I'm
spirit arises.
monologuing, as Mr. Incredible says.
Yes.
So I went ahead and did a bachelor's in women's studies, and then I went to University of Minnesota Mankato.
I saw that this morning.
Yes, for all these connections,
Uh-huh.
and did a master's in women's studies. And then I applied for PhD programs, and I was accepted and given a fellowship into a program that was women's studies and religion. And if I'm being completely honest, I was really disappointed because I didn't want to necessarily study religion. I'd kind of been rejecting some of that early
Mhm.
religious upbringing and wasn't quite sure how I felt about it. But I did go, and my PhD is I got another master's along the way in religious studies, and then my
Right.
PhD is in women's studies and religion.
It's too bad you're such an underaccomplisher. It's really disappointing.
Right.
I mean, you start this story by saying, I finally got through high school.
Yeah.
And then 4 degrees later.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I would,
Yeah.
because you know things better than I do.
Yes. Wow. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I was telling you yesterday, I'm not a very quick reader. I
Mhm.
can't spell. So I'm missing some really foundational pieces of knowledge because that's what happens when you drink your way through childhood.
Oh, that's
Right?
interesting.
So, but
Yeah.
that also worked to my benefit because I had such serious imposter syndrome that I studied extra hard and
Yeah.
really, tried to make up for my deficits.
Well,
So
I think you can stop saying tried to and say I did.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So it worked out for me. It's funny how some of our hardest times end up working out and giving us gifts.
Boy, that is perhaps a phrase never truer stated. I mean, I think so often about the moments of my life, including Maz's fall into alcoholism. I would not have picked that on the front end. If someone had said to me 20 years ago, okay, we're looking for a mate for you. Here's some qualities. Irish accent? Absolutely. Highly educated? Sure.
Yep.
Pleasant and willing to accept your son? Yes. Alcoholic? No thanks.
Yep.
I would have passed on that. But it has been, and I'll just speak for my side of it, and then you can comment too. It has been truly one of the most extraordinary gifts of my life to have lived through it. And not just because he came out of it, but because it forced me and gifted me with some personal learning I couldn't have done any other way.
Absolutely.
I think you're right. I mean, I wouldn't have picked it either, but I think I've come out of it probably a far better person than I was when I succumbed to alcoholism, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we don't take the time to learn from the dark, how can we ever celebrate the light?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I don't know about you, but I don't personally like to run into a painful experience.
No.
I'm definitely not a firefighter.
But not intentionally.
You don't really go that way.
Right. Yeah, I'm definitely run the other way.
Yeah.
And yet that's where I start stretching and growing and transforming into this different version of myself that is always more layered and complex.
Mhm.
and I end up having more empathy, and my heart grows, and I end up being able to connect with different types of people in a more meaningful way. So it is a gift,
Yeah.
especially for for my humanity and my ability to connect with others.
Yeah, we don't need to go into this, but can you well, I no, we do need to go into this because I'm curious about it. Can you talk quickly about this United Nations unelected seat that you have, which I find highly
Oh,
fascinating?
yeah, yeah. So that I held for 2 years,
Okay.
and that was with American Mothers, and I think it was 2015 or 16, I was, elected as the California Mother of the Year, and so I know.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
I'm sorry. I was going to say congratulations. I was kind of stunned into silence there
There's a
for a
lot of
second.
mothers in California,
Yeah,
Amy. That's
I
a
was
big
thinking
state.
that's better than Mother of the Year in Minnesota.
Or North Dakota.
There's fewer of them.
Yes. I mean, it's still a big deal
Still
in North
cool,
Dakota.
yes.
Don't mishear us, but California's got a lot of mothers.
Well, my kids and I joke, and of course, my husband Kevin, that they just haven't caught me yelling yet. But when, when they called to tell me, I said, "Oh, wow, I'm really flattered, but I'm not sure I can do this." And they said, "This isn't about being a perfect mother; it's about representing other mothers." And I said,
That's
"Oh,
brilliant.
I can do that."
Yeah.
That's great.
That took the pressure right off.
That's actually a really lovely thing to represent, not the Barbie doll version of a woman, but the complete version
Exactly.
of a woman. Happy to
Exactly.
be a mother.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
American
Okay.
Mothers was actually founded by, I believe it was Eleanor Roosevelt, and she negotiated for a non-member seat at the United Nations when she was the first lady. And so that other nonprofits and NGOs do have non-member status, but that was a really unique and special experience that I was able to attend the UN, especially the sessions on women and children. And, I always gravitate towards the sessions on, any type of information or action that can help women and children who don't have a lot of bodily autonomy or agency.
Yeah. Which is
So that
so many women, not across the planet. I mean,
absolutely,
many in America, and we have so much more autonomy than so many women everywhere else. It's just extraordinary.
it is. It is. So that's how that happened. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's
That is
really
really interesting.
incredible.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you.
So I want to put up, well, first let me put up this comment from my mother.
Oh, yay.
You'll read
Oh,
this and
hello,
go,
Bonnie.
"Oh, that's where the adjectives come from." Look at all caps. Yeah, you can tell whose daughter I am.
That's awesome. I use a lot of exclamation points in my emails,
There's
Bonnie.
enough
So
distance between them.
Yeah, just for anyone who's listening, because this is also a podcast. Amy, I think you are fantastic. This is wonderful. Your story is riveting. I think it's good you can't spell real well. It gives the rest of us something to connect to. Seriously, this is impressive.
Smiley face.
Smiley face. Yeah, I would agree.
thank you, Bonnie. Where does Bonnie live?
She lives in Minnesota, not too far from where you were. She's in Egan.
You have my heart, Bonnie.
Yeah.
I'm from
Yeah.
Minnesota.
So here is the transitional website we're going to move to now.
Okay.
Talk about what you did from 18-year-old young
Mhm.
figuring clearly a number of things out and making it stick. Congratulations on that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
To now being this, I'm going to go with self-actualized woman who has opted to figure out how to help other women, myself included now, also reach that new place through this work that you are doing with your sister and your sister-in-law called the Whole Health Lab. So that's the end of my introduction. Let's talk about this work that you're doing, Amy.
Absolutely. So, first, I'll back up a little bit and say that it came out of a genuine curiosity for me. I was leading a group of researchers. We were looking at how national conflict affects women specifically in post genocide Rwanda and post apartheid South Africa. And we originally went into the research project. This was about 5-6 years ago. There you get to an age and everything was 2 or 3 years ago. I feel like I'm getting there.
COVID was either 10 minutes or 52 years.
Last week when I was in Rwanda. No. So we went into this research project looking at forgiveness specifically, and if religion was a hindrance or a help in terms of forgiveness after this conflict, especially in those two countries, because they both had government encouragement to make reparations.
Yep.
And so when we looked at all of the interviews we did, hundreds of interviews, I started then going into the neuroscience and looking at the brain and what the mechanism of forgiveness in the brain. And this is when I realized that the trauma literature in neuroscience shows that when you do have a really, it doesn't even have to be a significant trauma. A trauma can be anything that disconnects you from your prefrontal cortex and puts you into your limbic brain and then alters your perception going forward in life. And so when that happens, we actually lose, first of all, our memories are pretty fragmented. Second of all, we lose access to our language center. And third, we end up having an autonomic or automatic reaction. And so our agency is bypassed by the brain's imperative to survive. And until we address that original issue, we can't reconnect the full perspective, thus making active choices, right?
Wow.
Which I know. So coupled with the literature on forgiveness in the brain, which says in order to forgive, you have to make an active choice first to forgive. So how do you make an active choice to forgive when you have lost a sense of choice and agency because you can't recover exactly the scope of what happened? And so that is really where I started just obsessing, over the research and realizing we have to find ways to deal with anything hard and adverse that has happened to us, whether it's a big T trauma or sustained toxic stress, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we don't, we're not going to be able to move past that, whether you call it forgiveness or reparations or reconciliation. We're not necessarily going to be able to move into that next phase of making peace. And so that was the impetus. And then it turned into, okay, so how do you do that? And as I was talking to my two sisters, one is an MD and one is a therapist. And we realized we had all been working in this same area of toxic stress and trauma in our respective fields without realizing it.
Uh-huh.
So we came together and decided, let's offer a program that is clinically based on all the research and all the metadata that shows what's actually working to heal from chronic stress or trauma. And that's what we did. So it has some talk aspects where sometimes we can talk about adversity, but the research actually shows the more we talk about our specific trauma, those neural pathways actually go deeper in our brain and then we can get re-triggered. So one of the best ways to deal with toxic stress or trauma is through the body. But if you go to talk therapy, which I am a huge proponent of, I mean, I love talk therapy. I told y'all yesterday, my family and I are in therapy right now, trying to overcome sibling rivalry and figure out some skills, for making sure that we're not carrying on patterns. So I love talk therapy. But if you go to a talk therapist, it is highly unlikely they're going to have you do yoga, trauma-informed yoga, or meditation, or EFT tapping, or any of the modalities that in the scientific literature show to be as effective or more effective than talk therapy, specifically for trauma or toxic stress. And who has the money to pay for a therapist and then go pay for a somatic experiencing coach and then go to get to a meditation retreat, or
Mhm.
maybe even it's just to download an app, but there was no place where you could get everything all in one spot. And so that's what we've done. We've combined all the somatic therapy, which somatic is body, with talking, with community, and then with resilience training, because we're going to continue to have hard things happen in our lives. And when hard things happen, if we've built resilience, it's like mental or physical fitness. If you've been working out, you are more able to reduce injury. Doesn't mean you won't have a fall. It doesn't mean you're not going to twist your ankle, but your body will be more able to get over that physical injury. And that's the same with mental fitness. If we build resilience when we have our next adversity, and that is guaranteed in life, we will be able to bounce back and do so in a way that is hopefully less stressful and quicker.
Mhm.
So yeah, that is the whole health lab. And that was how we started.
Incredibly interesting.
I know, isn't it
Yeah.
amazing? So we tell this funny story sometimes. When Maz was living in inpatient rehab, and I could go visit him, I showed up on a Wednesday visit or whenever it was, and he came hobbling in like he had been in a street brawl. And I thought, oh my gosh, what happened? And so he kind of gingerly sat down like a 95-year-old.
Well, I wasn't paying.
And I said, what happened to you? And he said, yoga.
Yeah, you get a bunch of addicts in a room together and decide it's a good idea. Hey, let's get out the yoga mats and stretch. Nothing good comes out of that, I can tell you.
Your body was a little in shock.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
Yeah. But you know, I can say this. I even understood without knowing any of the research that what we so often do just as human beings is we disconnect our bodies from our minds, from our emotions, from our physical presence, often out of necessity. I mean,
It's a survival tool.
things so horrific that you just have to kind of divorce yourself. But then often from a place of just an unconscious, this is too hard to think about. This makes me feel bad. I'll go eat a bag of chips. I'll go drink too much. Whatever it is that you use to sort of act as that buffer between acknowledging what's painful or uncomfortable and really sitting with it. And
absolutely.
I feel so fortunate that as an actor, I spent a tremendous amount of time breathing, studying breathing. And, you know, breathing is like blinking. We all take it for granted because we all understand we do it, but we so rarely pay any attention to it. And when you do, the transformation is almost immediate. I mean, people who've never had this experience always roll their eyes at me, but I spent a summer studying Shakespeare in the Catskills of New York. There were 50 of us, and every morning we would do 45 minutes of deep breathing exercises. So there we all are lying on the floor, breathing, and to a morning, 10 weeks of this, somebody would go, and they would start to cry.
Yes.
And then pretty soon all 50 of us were crying. And you could say, well, of course you were. It was 50 actors, which is true. Sorry.
Maz about lost his drink there.
He sure did. But it's also a case of that's a really profoundly intimate thing to do, to consciously breathe. And we just don't do it because it can be really painful.
Absolutely. Well, and I also think that we tend to minimize, at least I do, the simple things as that there's no way that's going to be effective. I need to go find someone and go talk in detail about every bad thing that happened, and that's going to be effective. But in fact, the research shows specifically with trauma or toxic stress, breath work is as effective or more effective than talking about what's happened to us. Isn't that interesting?
It is very interesting.
And breath work was actually one of my first, of course, I had recovery and I had talk therapy, but breath work was one of the very first somatic tools that I used a few years ago. And it cracked me open.
Mm-hmm.
And I had, I almost didn't go to the session. A friend invited me and I thought, okay.
Yeah.
And of course I was the one on the floor sobbing,
Yep. Yep.
And so that was I have a deep affinity for breath work and an appreciation for it.
I do too. I want to put up some comments, Amy, see if there's anything for you to respond to. I can't ever read them until they show up, so I don't know what we're looking at. They're too far away for me. I think it's important for people to have their own Zen space in order to reconnect and be able to come to terms with certain things that are going on within ourselves. Not always easy to find, but when you do, it makes a wonderful outlet to healing. Boy, let me just put in a plug for our friend John Z, Amy. If you ever make your way back up here, I will drive you the 100 miles to John's garden, because John's garden, I think, is truly one of the most magical places I have ever been. That is an outlet. I don't care what you've lived through. If you sat in that garden, you would be healed.
Yeah.
It's an incredible space. So I think John knows what he speaks because he's out there, gardens don't happen. You got to work on.
His Zen space. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and there is a lot of research. I'm sure John probably knows this intuitively, but maybe also intellectually, of, literally walking on the ground with bare feet helps us. It literally can help ground us. And that sounds so, so much of this, I thought, oh, that's so woo-woo. It's not science. And that's why we went to the science when we were putting together our program, because I knew I was having these healing experiences with these things that didn't seem like hard science. But in fact, when you start looking through the research, it's there. And you just have to look in different disciplines. It's not always going to be in psychology. Sometimes it's occupational therapy. Sometimes it's religious studies. Sometimes it's medicine, neuroscience. And so if you start looking at the literature in many different disciplines, you see this theme of the body really being the true mechanism to healing, and having that Zen space or walking in nature is part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. One more comment.
Yeah.
There's a player that I can't quit thinking about, and I would love to know what she is made of and how she did what she did. Your friend that called your parents. Oh, so yeah, okay. It's an incredible thing for a young person to do, knowing you may very well lose your friend and more. That person is one I won't forget. I guess do the hard thing in the lesson. You might be being used by the universe to get someone someplace that they can't get if you don't do the hard thing. Boy, isn't that true? If she had just thought, she'll be mad at me and she'll figure this out because we're young and everybody drinks, it'll be fine. We probably wouldn't be having this conversation, because you clearly, Hazelden didn't say to you, it's fine. Just go back.
It's a mistake. Your parents are overreacting.
Yeah. And I'm sure it wasn't because they needed the money. I mean, I'm sure they actually believed you needed.
Absolutely. And, there was a waiting list back then, and this was in the late 80s. We had to wait a month for a bed to open up. So this is, and it's even harder now to find open availability for in-treatment facilities. So to answer your mom's question, Becca is her name. And she's incredible. She is a mom of 3 beautiful children. She is, I would say, very self-actualized, and has led a great, wonderful life with also hardship, and also her own journey of coming through that and rediscovering herself. But she's amazing.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear.
That's lovely. So I have a clinical question, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it. As I'm listening to you talk about how talk therapy can actually sort of further cement things, that has me wondering about the efficacy of daily dose.
Oh dear. Go for it, girl.
So,
could be our last episode.
It could be. Twice a week, we get on and we talk about this journey into, out of, and back to healing. And sometimes it's a little accusatory from this one to that one. And, it's clear to me that sometimes I get off and think, oh, wow, you're still working through stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is part of why I'm now with you. I'm trying to without doing it on Maz's back.
Yes.
So what do you say about that, from this very immediate perspective?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind is so keep in mind, let's put a framework around my my statements that talk therapy can be re-triggering, and that is for a traumatic event. And so again, what you're talking about was traumatic. And even though it was over a period of time, it caused what we would call chronic stress or toxic stress. And so there's a couple different areas of research on this. One, that when we do talk about it and we are forming new areas of framing it. So right now, I would say just by virtue of doing this show, you're reframing how this affected you. So when you talk about it, you're not sitting saying, this is a static event and my feelings are static about this. It's actually dynamic and you're processing. And as we process, we start reframing the experience. And so that can be beneficial, especially in a relationship, right? Because it is a dynamic exchange. And so, my husband and I, we still go to therapy about every 5 years. We end up back in therapy. We've been married almost 22 years, and it'll be like,
congratulations.
Oh, thank you. But you reach that point, you're like, you are getting on my nerves, and I know I'm getting on yours. It is time to go see someone again. Oh yeah, it's been about 5 years. We need some skills. We need a refresh. And so I think with relationships, I find it so beneficial to have a trained third party to listen to both of us and help figure out what we're doing. And by virtue of doing this show, you have a lot of third parties. They may not necessarily be trained therapists, but obviously you have found, there's a part of me that has some stuff to work through. And so you're taking care of that as well. So I actually feel like this could be very healthy and a great outlet.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I was hoping that was the answer, but I didn't want to assume that was the answer.
Yeah.
And I was prepared to hear you say, yeah, this is probably making things worse. My recommendation is you stop this.
No. In fact, but again, I haven't watched a lot of episodes, but if you repeated the same exact incident publicly and were using shaming language, that could be problematic. And so watching how we frame things, watching what we focus on. And it does seem just the whole platform of the show is focusing on the post-traumatic growth is what I see.
Certainly. Yes.
And that's resilient building. I mean, that is like resilience 101.
Okay.
It's post-traumatic growth. It's like, what have we learned from this? How are we moving forward through this? So I think it's a gift that you're letting people into this dynamic.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. That's a good answer.
It's quite vulnerable. So I'm really impressed.
Well, it can be. Yeah. I will just say to the watching audience, how surprised could anyone be that I have signed up to do this whole health lab? And I mean, I didn't even have a chance to meet you before I signed up for it, but let me put the website back up just in case anyone missed it before. So it's mendingtrauma.com/whole health lab. Excuse me.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about, just quickly, because I know you have a place to be as well. Let's talk about sort of who's this program for, Amy?
Yeah.
And what are you discovering from it?
Thank you. That's a great question. Well, we do have a goal to help as many people as possible. Right now, we have developed the program specifically for high achieving individuals. And the reason we did that is because, twofold. one, typically they are less afraid to then go tell people what they're doing. And that's a great way for people to understand and word of mouth. But second of all, my sisters and I, we realized that our particular response to trauma and toxic stress was work and overworking and overachieving.
Yeah.
And the constant hustle. And I always say now, I don't drink, but work is my drug of choice.
Yeah.
And so I constantly have to set those boundaries, because in our culture, we're praised for overworking. And so it's really, it's important, I believe, that we are able to accept compliments and we are able to recognize our accomplishments. And I think those are wonderful. And we also want to look at how that might be another way of numbing out. And so particularly the whole health lab takes high achieving people. We meet them where they're at. The content is easily digestible. It's very short. The modules are very short. Each video is very short. You can watch it on the go. We have a downloadable app. And we also have all the somatic tools as well. And, for instance, our tapping technique that was done by a certified emotional freedom tapping technique practitioner who also happens to be a Harvard psychiatrist. So we, what the awesome thing about putting a program together like this that's digital and online is you can grab from all the experts and say, hey, would you do this for us? And we would love to pay you for this, and this will live in our community. And so it's for busy people. It's for really for people who are looking to kind of get unstuck. So we're not sitting around talking about capital T trauma all day. We'll use that phrase, but we're really looking to help people get out of their own way, because as I mentioned, we have those autonomic responses and we end up sabotaging ourselves accidentally, and we don't even know how or why. But it's all of the nervous system dysregulation and the cognitive distortion that comes from chronic stress or trauma. And so if you could have a capital T trauma, or you could have something that is just a sustained hardship that has altered how you operate in the world. And the program still works the same, because the science is about reconnecting your nervous system and reprogramming your brain.
So I loved my conversation with you and your sister Lena, because I took 2 assessments. I took the ACE test to assess childhood trauma.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm not afraid to or ashamed to admit I got a 1, because my parents
a miracle. You're one of you're a unicorn.
I'm sure that is true. And any minute now, my mother's going to chime in and say, well, when Dana talked to me about it, I got a 0. So, but
she's an OG unicorn.
I got a barely 1, because I was almost an adult when my parents got divorced. But my kind of current level of, I forget exactly what it's called, but kind of my current state was fairly high. And Lena said to me, you said in the assessment that you are like jumpy.
Yeah.
And poor Maz and our son Quinn will both admit that I can know that they're in the house. I can hear them coming towards me, and they'll say to me, Mom, and I'll go, what?
Yeah.
I mean, I might be the most tightly wound human being I have ever met.
That's what I mean, if she wants a cup of tea, is a tightrope sometimes.
Very so the piece that makes me really so grateful to have found you is that I don't have any big T trauma in my life. I am unbelievably fortunate to not have some of those life-altering traumas. That being said, I've had plenty of ongoing stress. I've had periods of uncertainty and periods of difficulty. And I would say, find me the person who hasn't.
Absolutely.
And what you helped me lean into was there is a place for me to say to people, I didn't have big T trauma, but I've had difficulties and I need to work through them. And no one's going to say to me, well, that's not bad enough. It's like you going to Hazelden. They didn't say to you, sure, you might drink too much, but it's not that bad. No, it was bad enough to get to stay. Yep. You made me feel like I belonged here. Yeah. And I never belong anywhere. Oh. So I just think anybody watching this, look into the site. I mean, I'm 4 days into it, so I'm not really versed enough in it to be able to say, and now I'm cured. I wish I were. Yeah, right. But look into this program. If you have felt for much of your life like you lived through something hard, but it wasn't hard enough to merit getting help. Yeah. That's an incredible thing. I've almost never the way I felt when I got off that call with the two of you, because you did not discount the fact that my life has been hard for me. Yeah. It's amazing.
Well, thank you.
We make the mistake of relating ourselves to other people.
Yeah, like, and thinking there's a hierarchy.
My gosh, no wonder there's something wrong with you. Your life is terrible, mine's fine, but it doesn't matter. It's still your trauma.
Exactly.
Well, my immune system doesn't know how to hierarchically rank trauma. My nervous system doesn't go, wasn't bad. It just winds me up from the minute I wake up until the minute I go to sleep.
And that's why I love going back to the neuroscience and the psych biology, essentially, literature, which is a newer field in the last 15 years, because we don't have to compare stories. We just know there are certain symptoms of a dysregulated nervous system. And that's all we need to assess is what are our symptoms. So we don't have to focus and make a story about our identity being what happened to us. And I mean, it can be part of our identity. It certainly is part of mine. This is who I am because I got sober and because I had that. However, we can focus on reducing symptoms by doing things that we know work because of research. And it levels the pain hierarchy field, right? Because pain is pain and dysregulation is dysregulation.
Yeah. Well, Amy, thanks so much for joining us. I got onto the first group call last night and we'd had a guest who canceled. And so I said, anybody want to join? And Amy, I'm just going to say you failed in your, I'm trying not to overwork, because I know you add this to your plate, but I appreciate that you did.
I appreciate the fact that you did. So you and your sisters do fantastic work. I thank you for that. And I hope.
Thank you.
I'm so excited for me to not be hysterical every time you walk into the room.
You're like Mary Poppins. You are practically perfect in every way. You know,
yes.
You don't want to yell a little bit more. That's fine.
Yes. I feel that deeply. Yes. Thank you. Well, thank you, Maz. And thank you, Dana.
Well,
it's an honor to be here.
Thanks for sharing your story and for doing this work. I know I'm not going to be the only one who benefits from it. And everybody else, maybe we'll have Amy back as I get deeper into the program, or we'll have Lena on and we'll talk a little bit more about it as we can use what I'm uncovering without revealing anybody else's journey.
Yeah. If you're comfortable with that, we would be honored.
Clearly, I'm happy to talk about almost anything. So,
well, Amy, to me, and I hope you and your family enjoy the holiday weekend.
Yes,
thank you so much. You too.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Amy. Everybody else, we will be back next week. Happy 4th of July. Be safe. Don't blow your fingers and other stuff off. Probably that involves don't drink and light the fireworks.
Yes, and
that's pretty important.
Take a thought for pets and veterans.
Yes, pets and veterans. So put up notices if you're going to be doing fireworks, because that can be really trauma triggering for many, many people for lots and lots of reasons. So have a great day, everyone. We will see you next week. Bye. Amy, thanks again.
Bye, everyone.